Family business transition, a tremendous challenge for every company that wants to pass their business on from one generation to the next. My guest today is George Cullen. He is a fifth generation owner of JP Cullen, a construction company out of Wisconsin, and they've been in business since 1892. What has enabled them to pass the business on from one generation of family members to the next? It's an approach to family business transition that is both thoughtful and practical. And in today's discussion, we talk about the timeline that you need to be embracing if you're going to successfully transition a business, the difference between owning a business and managing a business as it relates to the next generation, the importance of the next generation of leaders gaining outside experience with different companies before coming into the business itself, a family transition plan which includes an educational process either in college or in the vocational fields that will qualify the family member coming into the business for the position and for the leadership opportunities that present themselves. We also talk about different leadership structures between one generation and the next, the challenges and opportunities of siblings working together, and how to pick, evaluate, and utilize outside advisors to help you with this process. Our talk is wide-ranging, and there are some very important details that you want to pay close attention to, including George's tips for managing time and separating family from business. So as I always say, enjoy my conversation with George. He is incredibly generous with his time. Make sure that you are taking close notes mentally or physically if you're not driving around about the aspects of our conversation that are applicable to you and your business. If you have any questions about family transitions or business transitions of any kind, always feel free to reach out to me, constructiongenius.com. I'm chatting with my clients about that all the time. You can contact me via my website. And again, thanks to George for his generosity. Enjoy my interview, and let's dive right into the episode. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. George, welcome to Construction Genius.
Hello, Eric. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I've wanted to get you on the show because of the unique aspect of Cullen being a fifth generation family business. And I want to just kick off right away by asking you, why do you think family businesses struggle with transitioning the business from one generation to another?
Well, that's a great question. And I think one of the primary things that makes it difficult is whether it's the founder or in our case, the fourth generation owners, it's their baby. And it can be very difficult for them to let it go. And it can also be difficult for them to think about what that transition period needs to look like. Fortunately, for myself, our fourth generation owners who transitioned it to our fifth generation ownership, they started planning that at least 15 years before their transition date was going to happen. So I would assume other businesses that don't do as well don't take that thoughtful amount of time to really understand what it takes to successfully transition a business, because they're holding on too tight and it's their baby and they really want to protect it because it's meant so much to them.
Just before we go into more detail on that, can you just give us a quick overview of the history of your company?
Yep. So we're JP Cullen. We're a construction manager here in Wisconsin, but we do work throughout the country. We were founded in 1892 by my great-great-grandfather, who was a son of an Irish immigrant. He was a carpenter. His first job was building a house. And I often say my job as the leader of the company is to carry on his spirit of entrepreneurship. And I'm a steward of that to ensure that I can pass it to my children as a sixth generation business. So he started in 1892. His name was JP, hence the name. His son, Mark, took over the business, guided the business through World War I, through the Great Depression. He then transitioned it to his son, another JP who was a World War II combat veteran, came back after graduating from Nebraska and really just took the company through a technological advancement. He was one of the first guys to invest in a computer system. He owned the first tower crane in Wisconsin. He just did a great job of advancing the business. He then transitioned again his business to his three sons who were in the company, my dad and two uncles who took over ownership in the early 80s. And they've just shepherded explosive growth and position us now here today where we're roughly a $400 million a year self-performing contractor. We feel very strongly about performing the work in the field. We employ between 400 to 500 skilled tradespeople. And we're now into our fifth generation. My sister, Jeannie, and I lead the business as co-presidents, and we have three fellow G5 owners, as well as our uncle, who is our vice president of field operations, who is still in ownership representing the fourth generation.
What I'm really curious about is, what is it about your family that drives this desire to pass the business on from one generation to another?
It's another great question. And I think what's great about construction is there is such a physical representation of that transition. We've got multiple buildings where multiple generations have worked on it. So it truly is something that is across generations. And there's so much pride in our family. And even more importantly, within the employees of our company, because we've been talking about our family, but we're only as successful as the non-Cullens who have just carried this business forward. And all of us, whether it's a Cullen or a non-Cullen, take a ton of pride in going to University of Wisconsin's campus and pointing at Bascom Hall that we built in the addition onto in 1922, going to One West Wilson in Madison, where three generations of Cullens, including myself, have worked on it. There's just that part of construction that our projects stay there. So it's something that is our legacy, and it's something that we like to say, when you hire JP Cullen, you're going to get a Cullen. It's our name on the line. We take a ton of pride in it. Our people take a ton of pride in it. And I think that type of industry helps you in transitioning because it is such a physical product that we take a ton of pride in.
So when you were young and you were watching your dad, and your dad was, obviously you knew what he did for a living, et cetera.
Yep.
At the house, was there an expectation that you're coming in the business? Was it an option? How did he handle that?
Well, again, I'll give our fourth generation a ton of credit. They set up a family employment policy. Again, it was about 15 years ago when none of their children were even close to the point of where they'd be able to enter into the business. And that family employment policy required that you'd have to get a degree in a related field, get an apprenticeship, and then it also dictated that you had to work elsewhere before coming back into the business and get that experience outside of our family business. So for my direct path, I knew it was an opportunity for me. I had a lot of passion, like I said before, about going around where I live and seeing the buildings that we're able to accomplish. I took a ton of pride in all the jobs and the people who've been able to make a great living for our business. So I did feel a strong sense of responsibility to carry it forward, but there was never any pressure. I went to school out in DC and interned for our congressman and was able to get that exposure to a totally different industry. I went to school and graduated with a degree in finance, and most of my classmates went on to Wall Street. So there was different opportunities, different ideas, but I always did get drawn back to our family legacy. And what I love about construction is you can get into the finance, you can obviously get into people leadership, marketing and business development, estimating, physical construction. Every day something's different. So I just was so drawn to this industry, and I'm so happy that I did.
It's interesting. We're just hitting the 50th anniversary of the Godfather movie, and I'm not.
I love that movie and the books.
I love it. I love it. And one of the themes of the first movie is you have Michael Corleone on the edges of the business, and over time he gets drawn into the business. Yep. Now, what my question to you about that is, Was that ever the case with you where, when you went off to college and you were getting involved in the DC world, was there a point of crisis at any point where you said, I've tasted this, I've seen that, but I'm going to choose to come back to the family business? Did that ever happen for you?
It did. And where it really happened is I moved out to Southern California to work for a mechanical contractor. I was in San Diego. And as much as I love Wisconsin, Southern California might be a little bit more of an attractive place to live.
Yeah.
But more importantly, my wife's from California. She had great relationships there. But again, the thing that got me to the crisis is the company that I work for, Comfort Systems USA. I had built my own career there in the time that I was there. I had conversations with them about what my future growth could be within their business. And it was extremely emotional when I came to them and let them know, they knew I had a family business, and they would joke with me, our goal is to tell you that we're going to get you to stay or convince you to stay. But it was extremely emotional when I went to the then president and let him know that my time has come to come back to the family business. My grandpa was getting up there in age. It was really important to me to join the business so that I could interact with him, because he came into the office every day up until he passed at 91 or 92. And that was one of the things that drew me back, is my wife and I had just gotten married, and just getting there so I could interact with my grandpa while he was still here. And thankfully they were very understanding of it, but it was still extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting. Going back to the family employment policy, I noticed three things here: a degree in the related field, an apprenticeship. Now, tell me about that apprenticeship piece.
So it's a dual path. So since we are a very intentional builder, we want tradespeople. In fact, my uncle, who's our vice president of our field operations, he went through a union apprenticeship and was a union carpenter.
Yep.
So we didn't want to just dictate that if you're going to join Cullen, you have to get a college degree. We're very conscious that the backbone of our business is skilled tradespeople.
Yep.
So if a Cullen wants to join the business, they could either go get their degree or they would go get their apprenticeship.
I see. So it's one or the other.
One or the other. Yep.
I see. Okay. And now, why is it that you guys think the work outside in another? Now, is it in the industry or any kind of industry? Tell me about that.
It's in the industry, but it can be related. My sister, who is our training and development manager, I have two sisters in the business. One is my fellow co-president. But my other sister, Laura, she worked in the Bay Area for an architecture firm in marketing.
Yep.
So it's related. So it's why is it important is my experience. We're blessed that JP Cullen is a pretty good sized company in Wisconsin. And I was able to go out to California where my last name didn't mean anything. I could go out there and stand on my own 2 feet. I could go out there and achieve and get the work done. And it was just so important to go somewhere else and get the perspective of how another business was ran. In fact, that business is publicly traded, so very different than a closely held family business, which each have pluses and minuses. And the last thing I'll say why it's so important is I work for a mechanical contractor. Prior to that, I was an intern at an electrical contractor. And as a GC or as a CM, a lot of our success is built on how successful our subcontractors are.
Absolutely.
So getting that perspective of working as a sub and understanding what it takes to be for a sub to be successful has been invaluable for me now that I lead a general contracting business, because we want our subs to be successful because it helps make us successful.
So you've got the family employment policy. When you came back to the business, what position did you start in?
Yep. So our process requires that you have to apply for an open position. So I went through the interview process that anybody else would go through. Out in California, I'd started in estimating and budgeting. I got into project management. And then I was also challenged with leading one of our profit centers. It was a new one. It was a special projects group doing a lot of tenant improvements and the like.
Yep.
So when I came back to Cullen, I interviewed for a project manager position in our industrial division. Our interview process includes meeting with an industrial psychologist and then also going in front of a panel interview. So I interviewed with two of our division managers and then president. Importantly, none of them were Cullens, and went through the normal interview process and got asked the tough questions. We've got a pretty set, I would say, fairly difficult interview process where they're really questions that you got to think on your feet. They're really testing for what drives you. You got to give examples. And so I went through it. The thing that I chuckle about, the President Ron, who I succeeded, said, George, we'd like to offer you a job. Now we start to negotiate salary.
Nice.
And, I
Beautiful.
took a pretty good pay cut. And he was quick to point out it's more expensive in Southern California than in Wisconsin. But I went through the process just like anybody else would. And I think that's crucial.
How, as you got into the business, how did you avoid doing end runs around your immediate supervisor to go to your dad or your uncles or something like that?
Well, I think the immediate answer is my dad would say, why are you bringing this to me? If I were to ever do that, I never did.
Right.
But that would be the immediate answer. We're a pretty good sized organization, so there's aspects of the business that's impossible for ownership to be involved with. We can have some oversight, but it would just have been inappropriate. It wouldn't have been at the level of which our ownership is focused on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other real practical matter is I came back to Cullen and I looked around the room and I'm like, there's people in here who are a lot smarter than me. And there's people in here that I can learn from, including Chad Shackleman, who I reported to, our industrial vice president. And I wouldn't have done that because I knew he was the right guy to go get the answer. He was the right guy to go learn from. So that was never a problem because there are such talented people here that I knew if I listened to them, if I took coaching, I was going to be successful. So it was never a problem.
How do you handle, especially when you first got back in, how did you handle going out into the field and the guys knowing your last name and all that kind of stuff? And how did you handle that dynamic?
Well, thankfully, I had an exposure to it because I did work summers while I was in college at Cullen. I actually worked in our process improvement department. And my dad recognized for me to really get a good grasp of leading this company, if I was capable of it, I really needed to understand how the parts and pieces came together in the field.
Right.
Specifically with the work that we self-perform. So my job as a process improvement analyst is I would go out and film the crews, and I would then provide them feedback about how to get better and how to be more efficient, make their jobs easier. Well, I'm a college kid, and I quickly recognized that the guy who's been doing that for 20 years knows it way better than me and knows exactly the ways to get better. He just needs that open communication with management so that we can get the tools, equipment, material to them. So I'd set my camera up and make sure it's filming the operation. And then I would just go talk to the foreman and humbly ask them questions about what they're doing and why they do it that way. Quickly recognize, hey, I'm out here to be filming as a production analyst, but my real way I can add some value too is if they forgot a hammer back there, go get it and pitch your hand in and help them. So I came in with, it was driven by my grandpa, who always told me the most important person in the company is the person swinging the hammer. And everything we do is to support that person. So a deep respect for the field has been instilled in me, and I'm very thankful of that. So it was never a problem. I would always be going out and asking them how to learn more. I always have a deep appreciation for the work that our skilled craft people are doing. So, and thankfully those guys didn't treat me as the boss's kid. I've got a colorful story about an iron worker foreman who still works here, who had a pretty interesting name for me when he wasn't too happy that I was there as the process improvement analyst, and they didn't hold back. So I give them a lot of credit too. They knew it was important for me to develop and grow, even when I was working here as a college student during summers.
I think that's interesting. I would imagine that the reason why they were comfortable in treating you as one of the guys is because that's been the culture over the different generations of family ownership.
Yep, totally. It's a great point. And, I didn't cover that. Why I think one of the successes of our business is the Cullens are actively in the day-to-day of the business to make sure it's being driven forward.
Right.
and we're in value added positions. And we are helping the business meet its goals. And we're not sitting down in Florida collecting checks. We are there day to day. I mean, my dad, who led the business from the early 80s to the mid 2000s, just one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. And instilled into me now as the leader of the organization with my sister, it's a heavy weight that it's so crucial that we're successful because we employ right now our headcount 600 people.
Yeah.
And that takes a really well operated business to ensure we can have these great paying jobs, make an impact in the community. So that work ethic is just so instilled, and I think the non-Cullens recognize it, and it's part of the culture. And we've got great, unbelievable workers who are non-Cullens, and I just want to also convey, you know, we've got families that are multi-generational.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
actually have a grandfather, son, and grandson. The grandfather is now retired, but the sons are iron worker general superintendent,
Yep.
and the grandson is an excellent project manager for us. So that to me speaks to the culture, and there's a lot of them like that, and it fills me with a lot of pride.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got a hard hat on my shelf here. Tykert is a company out here in California, and they're multi-generational, and they have the same thing, you know,
Yep.
where they have multi-generations of field employees working with their company. It's tremendous. So you made the transition from PM to vice president. How did you feel about that transition? Were you ready? Was it a little early, a little late? What did you think?
Well, yeah, I think it was, in retrospect, it was very crucial because our then president, Ron, we were really not doing successfully what we wanted to do with business development and marketing.
Huh.
And we have a strategic planning process that every year we set strategic initiatives. And one of our strategic initiatives was to get back to what made us successful in capturing negotiated work. We have a process that we follow called whale hunting. Tom Searcy is one of our outside consultants who's just been a tremendous asset of ours to help instill that sales process to us. But we had fallen off. And Ron and I was loving project management. I love being out in the field. I love profit and loss responsibility. And Ron asked me, George, I think it's important that you lead this. We're not getting the results that we want, and I think you can help us. And my initial reaction was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do business development and marketing. I want to be in operations because I thought that was the critical area of the business. But I quickly saw that by applying operational techniques to business development and marketing really helped us get to be following our process. And there were so many parallels. And I'm very thankful for it because I would not have thought that that would have been the next step in my career before I got to the position that I'm in now. But the position I'm in now, a lot of my time is spent strategically thinking about how are we going to capture the revenue that we need to get to sustain our growth. So if I had just had that operations background, did not spend that time leading our business development and marketing and being really hands-on in work procurement, I think I would have been doing myself a disservice. And I'm very fortunate to get that experience.
Let's talk about that a little bit more then, because it's
Yep.
it's often a great challenge for people to go from a project-based approach to into that sales and business development role. What was the
Yep.
biggest challenge for you as you stepped into that role?
Well, definitely cold calling. While I was leading the team, I did have an expectation to go out and get work.
Yep.
So definitely that. But it quickly became apparent to me that if I could leverage my strength, being in my mind, a pretty good project manager,
Yep.
and showed the prospective customer that I knew what was important to deliver what they needed to have happen to make their facilities more operationally effective or whatever they needed it for,
Yep.
that was a value that I could bring that was different than somebody else. So there was that little bit of that uncomfortable nature of like, I don't want to be a sales guy. I don't want to be viewed as just somebody that's peddling something. But then I started to think about, well, what value can I bring? And how is
Yes.
that value unique? And how does that solve the problems of our current customer or prospective customer? So.
Yeah, see that right there, bringing that unique value and then solving problems, and then the technical understanding that you have, so that when you're in front of the client, you can perhaps hear things that other people who aren't as technical will just pass right over.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
definitely.
And so then you were in that position for a number of years. Were there conversations going on about the transition? Like, how did how did the fourth generation, was it sort of close to the vest? We don't want to quite tell you yet, or this is the plan if these things get done. Tell us about that.
Yep. So it's definitely, this is the plan if these things get done.
Okay.
And there was a very distinct difference between ownership transition and management transition. So ownership transition was something that was very well planned out. All of it was very well planned out, but was very well planned out, that had a 10-year horizon, that different steps needed to be achieved for a person to be a qualified shareholder.
Yep.
Again, meeting our family and business policy, being an active participant in the business. So that actually just finished in December, that ownership transition.
Can I ask you one thing about that,
Yep,
just real quick?
of course.
So you've got to be in the business and you've got to be working in the business
Correct.
to be an owner. Am I hearing that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. Now, and you feel free just not to answer this if you don't want, but do the portions of ownership change relative to the contribution of the owners?
No, that's a tremendous question, because it kind of goes into the management
Yeah.
distinction. Our shares were based on the portion of the family that's in the business. So it was held by the family members that are in the business, based upon how it transitioned from the fourth generation to the fifth. So the shares were completely based upon our three collective families and what their shares in the business were going into it. But what's so crucial for a family business, in my mind, if it is that the positions that we're in day to day, we get compensated at market for the position that we're filling.
Right.
So we all don't make the same amount. We have different bonus structures, and the day-to-day pay that we earn is in line with the position that we hold. So while the shares are just based upon the math, how it works out, the actual day-to-day compensation is based upon the contribution you're making to the business in the role that you're in. And all of us are in varying roles within the company.
Okay, so just so I'm clear here, so let's say your dad has a chunk of shares,
Yep.
and that is passed on to you and your sister, whereas your uncle has a chunk of shares and that's passed on to your cousins. Did I hear that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay,
It stays within the family.
Okay. How does that relate then? So you've got it's interesting because on the one hand, you've got the management structure, you've got you and your sister as co-presidents. And then how does the percentage of ownership weigh in with the structure of management when it comes to making decisions that impact the business?
So it's another really good question. I'm very proud of our fifth generation. We actually were working for a couple years with our family business consultant ourselves about how do we want to lead the business as owners, and then as if we're in those positions as managers. And the advice that our family business consultant gave us is, you really got to stair step the way decisions are made and make it very clear what is an ownership decision and what is a management decision. And I'm very proud and that we come together in November as owners with our owner's hat on, and we talk about things that should be at the ownership level. And then that direction is given to my sister and me as co-presidents, that we then have to go execute to meet our owners' requirements. And there's a pretty clear line. Once they give us that direction, what they want to see, we're now in executing mode, and we report to them as owners monthly. And I get it, we're owners and leaders at the same time. So, but at the same point, we know what the owners' objectives are. It's up to my sister and I, with our executive team, with our strategic planning team, with all of our great people, to then go meet the objectives of our ownership. And it's pretty, again, I give us credit to keep those lines as clear as we can. We talk and we meet quarterly. As owners, we meet monthly as presidents reporting to owners, but in those owners meetings, we really talk about the difference of wearing your owner hat and your day-to-day employee hat, and how it's so important to keep them separate. And I give my cousins and my other sister and my uncle a ton of credit that they recognize that it's important that Jeannie and I are enabled to lead the business and make the decisions to make their objectives.
So just to help us, can you give us one example of an ownership decision versus a management decision?
Yep. So an ownership decision would be a strategic investment,
Okay.
something that would make a modification to our balance sheet.
Okay.
Management decision is, what's the size of the bonus pool, and how will those bonuses be given out, and how do we set the bonus level? So I would say those are two areas, but really the biggest thing from a management thing that Jeannie and I are charged with is we need to meet our strategic plan. We set a strategic plan. We every month evaluate how are we doing against that plan, and everything that we have to do to achieve that plan falls into a management decision. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Excellent. So you've been co-president since October 2020?
So it's been a little bit longer. Tragically, our president, Ron Becker, just an incredibly sharp man, just an incredible engineer, tragically passed away from leukemia.
Oh.
And he was going to retire. Actually, he was going to retire on 2/22 of 22. So just a couple of weeks ago, and we celebrated his memory on that day. His wife came in for lunch, and we got everybody together. But when he fell ill with leukemia, it was actually in March of 2020, which was just when COVID was pretty rampant, and the impacts to the economy. So my sister and I took over leadership in March of 2020. Which in a lot of ways was a blessing in disguise, because as I'm sure other leaders have experienced, when you're leading in a crisis, you don't have a lot of time to think. You got to act, you got to make quick decisions, and you just got to keep moving. So I think in some ways, as much as I would never have wanted Ron to have to exit the business earlier than the plan was, having to do that transition during COVID, I think really allowed Jeannie and I to get into our own faster, and to give us the confidence, if we can get through this successfully, there's going to be other challenges, but we can look back at getting through that. And it's something I take a lot of pride in. My sister Jeannie is an awesome leader. We work really well together. And thankfully, the company's doing well. We have great people. But yeah, we've been leading since March of 2020.
So let's explore that. In that time, you're 2 years into the seat. What was the biggest challenge for you as co-president? What's been the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is recognizing, actually, you're going to hear me say this quite a bit. I think one of the hallmarks of success of our business has been we're always open to experts outside of the company. And we never want to think that everything we're doing is right and we can't learn from others. We're in a very great peer group that I'm able to bounce ideas off often. Right. We have a number of outside consultants. But one of those consultants who sat on our selection committee when Jeannie and I went through the evaluation process to see if we could lead the business, asked me to go out to coffee and just was talking to me about how things are going. And things are going well, but I won't forget, and I know this is a little bit of a cliche, but he said, if you're only working in the business, nobody else will be working outside of the business, and nobody else will be seeing around corners. And as much as I love going out to a job site and rolling up my sleeves and with the PM, really getting into the details of how we got to accomplish this, I always need to remind myself, George, there's a time and place, but the company needs you to be working outside of the business, and finding that right balance is something that I know I'm always going to have to be very cognizant about where I'm spending my time and where I can make the biggest value impact to the company. So
talk about that. Please talk about that for a moment. Then how do you discipline yourself to be working on the business and not getting stuck in the weeds?
Yep, it's a great question. I think thing that helps is by having a strategic plan and by thoughtfully thinking about what are the things we need to do this year, what are the things we need to do next year or 3 years out to really get this business to where we want to be.
Yep.
We have a vision statement that includes the financial goals that we want to be to. It
Yep.
includes the impact that we want to be making. And that strategic plan forces you to think about what are the things that you're going to work on to help us get there. An example right now is we do a lot of great things with technology. In fact, our IT manager just did a tremendous job getting us to Office 365. But as the leader of the business, I see an opportunity to make technology a differentiator
Right.
and being something that truly allows our people in the field to be more efficient and to make our customers' experience with us even better.
Right.
So that right now is one of those strategic things that I'm going to be working on with our team to just really make sure 3 years from now, we can look back and say, we really made some changes that got us to where we needed to be. So it's really focused on what that plan is and just being conscious of what am I doing to get us to where that plan gets us those results that we're looking for.
How does that affect the way you structure your calendar on a weekly or monthly basis?
I was going to get into that level of detail.
No, it's good. Please help people because I promise you, everybody struggles with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer, like I'm sure a lot of people are, in lists. And our IT manager did a tremendous job getting us to Office 365. So I was on a quest to not use paper at all. And I have thrown myself into the Microsoft environment with OneNote, To Do, and obviously Outlook, Excel, among others. But specifically, I really, and this is getting pretty granular.
No, that's fine. Go, please. Don't worry.
A really big fan of To Do, Microsoft To Do.
Okay.
And I set my weekly list, and I, in pretty good detail, say this is something that is a strategic initiative. This is something that I need to get done. This is something that is a day-to-day thing, and just really am thoughtful about my week and what am I going to work on. The other thing that took me a little bit, but then I got to where I'm pretty adamant about is I color code my calendar.
Right.
And I color code it based upon external work procurement, our execution, people development. And it's just a very nice visual way to look at where I'm spending my time. And it's been a useful tool for me within Outlook, is really using those colors to just look at my calendar and say, am I doing what I said I was going to do as far as time committed to developing people, time to work on strategic initiatives? So those would be the two things.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, let's pivot back to the, I want to go sibling dynamic here. So, I got 5 kids, and, I can imagine it being extremely entertaining if they ran a business together. So tell me what it's like to have your sister as a co-president, and your older sister, if I'm not mistaken.
My older sister. Yep. Well, first off, I'd say I'm extremely blessed because my sister is a dynamic, talented leader. And I come from a place of recognizing that if she's shoulder to shoulder with me, I'm going to be better and we're going to be more successful because of her talent level. So I really look at it as like, I'm blessed to have her as a partner that will help lead this business, because we are a pretty large organization, and it's large enough that it needs more than one person leading. And that's not to say we don't have disagreements.
Yep.
We went through a 2-year evaluation process with our industrial psychologists, our outside consultants, interviewed the people that we work with. We had to present a pretty thorough, individually, pretty thorough business plan about our vision for the company. And we're
let me ask you real quick. So
Yep.
what was the difference between your vision and her vision?
See, that's where I was going.
Great, please. Yeah.
We really identified that where we thought we were very similar, we actually had a lot of differences. And the ideas she had to propel us towards the vision that we set collectively were different than some of my ideas. Her background's in healthcare. She led our healthcare division, and she was really focused on doubling down and how do we get more healthcare opportunities. I came up through our industrial division, and I'm just extremely bullish on that market. And we've got great people executing those projects. So we brought into this process our own experiences, and we both had slightly different focuses on where the resources should be put towards the experiences. But we're able to hash those out, and I think we're very aligned with where we're trying to take the business. But again, from time to time, we do have good disagreements, and we learned again that we have some good differences that I think our people could probably rattle off, because they just know if she's in a meeting, she may handle something differently than how I will. So I think we complement each other very well.
Do you guys take care of different parts of the business? You know, when I
Yep.
think about a transition, I got to get someone who can get the work, someone who builds the work, someone who gets paid, and
Yep.
over, you know, people who can oversee all of those aspects. Tell me about that division of labor, so to speak.
Yeah. So we got through our 2-year evaluation process, and we got to the end, and the committee, which included our 3 owners, my dad who abstained but facilitated,
Yep.
2 uncles, our then president, and 3 outside advisors, our family business consultant, a very talented private equity leader, and then our executive from Travelers, who has oversight of our business and knows us really well. And we got to the end of that, and they told us that we would be doing a disservice to the business if we'd make one of you CEO and one of you COO,
Right.
or one of you president, one of you executive vice president. And their reasoning was, you guys complement each other so well that we think you could make a team that would really propel the business faster and to even better results. So what I'm getting at is they said, we'd like you to be co-presidents. And I'll be the first to admit, I just went through a 2-year process and I was pretty disappointed. I was like, man, there's nothing like tying with your sister. We're both very competitive. But thankfully, the family business consultant put us in touch with a couple other businesses that had co-presidents. And now that we have this term, I see it more often when I'm reading the Wall Street Journal or something else. And they connected us with 2 brothers who owned Torcon, and they had been co-presidents for 40 years. And it's a really impressive business. And to directly answer your question, they advised us against splitting it up by work procurement and work execution.
Interesting.
Because they said you wouldn't want a customer to be like, well, George just sold me this job. He then throws it over to Jeannie, and Jeannie's going to go execute it.
Yeah.
So we ended up splitting it up by profit centers and support functions. So Jeannie has our 2 divisions under her. I have our other 2 divisions, and we have executive leaders of those divisions. And then we did split up the support functions, the operations side and the procurement side. But we always, from the customer, make it very clear that Jeannie's going to be the one that will be their executive contact. And we really were thoughtful about how we split it up. And thankfully, the size of our business allows us to split it up. And we really can be pretty separated from what we're getting done. We come together corporately, but it's a big enough business where we don't step on each other's toes.
It's interesting to me because when I look at your previous generation, it looks like that there was kind of a more of the division of labor. Is that right? You mean your uncle's the VP of field ops, and your dad, was he the president? And how did that work?
Yeah, so my dad was the president, and my uncle David was always very talented in work procurement and really headed up our work procurement efforts.
Yeah.
And then my uncle Rich was the field ops. So they did have a different setup. And so, yep, you're right in that.
So that's another interesting aspect of managing a transition, is that what the company looks like today isn't necessarily what it has to look like tomorrow, but that can often be a challenge for someone who's been doing it this way for the past 20, 30 years, and it's worked so far. So why would I want to change it?
That was a great point. And that was some of the advice we got from those businesses that had the co-presidents. They didn't sugarcoat it. People are not going to be used to it. People are going to find it to be strange because it's not what they're used to. So they stressed how important it was to communicate the why, not only internally, but externally. So we were very focused on, why are we making these org chart changes? Why does this org chart allow for future growth, allow for us to do different things? Because as Cullens, as family owners, we really are focused on, how do we propel this business forward, and how do we pass on a business to our children that's different from the business that we took over. So that why, I think, is so important to communicate why those org chart changes are happening, the reason behind it.
How do you, so this just came to mind is, you have a I have one of my kids come and ask me for something, and he's already gone and asked his mom for it, and mom said no, but he comes to dad and dad says yes, and then there's that communication confusion. How do you and
Yep.
your sister avoid that? Do you have like personal one-on-one meetings? How do you guys do that?
Yep, exactly. So we meet once a week and we're intentional about it. And we definitely keep some of those bigger decisions on doc for those once a week discussions, but also recognize we may need to find a time to, during the pandemic, we would actually walk together all the time and really
Nice.
kind of talk through some of these things.
Nice.
But then specifically, how's that viewed among our business? Is
Yeah.
it's very clear. This type of decision goes to Jeannie. This type of decision goes to me.
Right on.
And if a decision that gets to my desk that really belongs with Jeannie, I'll politely just say, you really got to take that to Jeannie. Because that was the advice we got from the two brothers who led TourCon, that they never wanted to send out confusion about who makes what decision. And you just really got to watch that, because that's where this could get really messy. And thankfully, we are not experiencing that because we have been pretty disciplined to it.
That's excellent. A couple more questions here. You've been really generous with your time. There's family, there's business.
Yep.
How do you separate the two?
I'd like to tell you that they are separated, but I'm actually kind of proud to say that they're not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because come on, it's like, how are you going to do that?
Well, I think that it is, right? So it is pretty common for us when we're outside of the business to be talking about it. And I'm very blessed. My wife is a really impressive businesswoman who's another person that I go to for advice. And, she understands this is a family-owned business. It's to, again, kind of be a little bit cliche. It's in our blood.
Yeah.
It's what I love. So thankfully, she's always okay with either with her or when my sister and I, with our families get together. There are some times where I'll say, Jeannie, we got to go talk about something.
Yeah.
So I think we'd be fooling ourselves to think that wouldn't be how things are, and rather we're pretty upfront about it. And we all love the business so much that it's not like it's a challenge to talk about it, because it is so precious to us. So it's not a problem.
Awesome. So you've mentioned this throughout the interview, and I want to just explore it as we're wrapping up here. Tell me something about the value of outside advisors, how you guys go about picking them, and why you found them to be so beneficial over time.
Yep. Well, I again have a really current example of this technology initiative.
Yeah.
Is through our CFO's CFMA group. One of the outside speakers they brought in was a technology expert. And we kind of keep a running list of those type of experts that are out there. So when a problem arises, we know who to go to.
Yep.
And specifically for this technology initiative, I'm the first to admit that I cannot program a computer. I do not know how getting to the cloud works. And while we have a great IT manager, he's the only one that knows all that. And it helps him to have another resource. So we brought in this technology expert to help shepherd our technology initiative. And I really rely on that person to bring that expertise. So I think it's so crucial when you're evaluating who to bring in to assist you. They got to want to understand your business, and they got to take the time to not try to just bring a one size fit all solution.
Right.
And we're very fortunate that we have a number of outside advisors. We still work with Tom Searcy from Whale Hunting, Hunt Big Sales. And it's an important part of our process to understand and recognize what we don't know and find those experts to help us with what we don't know, and not be too prideful about it.
Right. How do you avoid the magic pill consultants? You know what I'm talking about? The guys or the gals who come in and say, just do this and it's going to change your life.
Yeah. Well, I know maybe some of our consultants may be listening to this. I think you need to recognize that there's a shelf life. There has to be a exit period, right? Like, as you bring somebody in to get you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
And if you continue to have them there, they're not getting you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
So I think if you're cognizant of like, well, what's the time horizon to get us to where we need to be?
That's neat.
And you're not getting there, I think that would tell you there's this magic pill that is not getting accomplished what you really need as a business.
That's excellent. Excellent. Okay, George, as we're wrapping up here then, I think what I'm taking away here is that you've got to have that transition period of 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
You've got to be able to have a clear structure in place of what it looks like to come into the business, what would you say are your 2 or 3 sort of golden nuggets that someone who's going through a transition can really take away from your experience that they should be really thinking about?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And to me, it's hard to boil it down to 2 to 3 because I constantly am reminded of things that our fourth generation did to set us up for success. But you mentioned a couple of them. I think it's being thoughtful that this is going to take time. It's not
Yeah.
a snap of the fingers. It's not something that is going to get accomplished without very thoughtful planning.
Yep.
Number 2 is I think you need to have the buy-in of the people who are outside of the ownership transition, your key leaders. And at Cullen, we're blessed to have extremely strong leaders. I'm very proud. 5 members of our executive team are graduates of our Young Leaders program, and they've been with us for a long amount of time.
Yep.
And 2 of those graduates include my sister and I. We graduated from our Young Leaders program. But
That's cool.
So those great non-owner leaders that you can really rely on and get those people bought in. And then number 3, I think just recognize that the people who are being transitioned to need to have thoughtful development programs. And we were so blessed. Ron Becker, he took personal pride and ownership to say, my job as the first non-Cullen president of this organization, my job is to ensure that when it goes from the 4th to the 5th, those 5th generation leaders are going to be ready. And he took personal interest to make sure my sister and I, when we were going to have that transition, we're going to be successful. So I think those things, and I'm sure there's others that will come to mind, but those really are the top 3 things for me.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm sorry, I got to ask you one more question.
No problem.
How
I'm a
do
big
you-
fan of the podcast. In fact, I just shared one of yours this morning about incremental development to all of our
Nice.
PMs and SUKs. So I'm having a lot of fun being here.
Awesome. I'm grateful for you doing that. How do you retain top talent who are looking at their opportunity at Cullen and the doorway to ownership perhaps isn't there?
Yeah, it's another really great question. First, we need to provide an environment that they know they can grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to summarize to our new people that when our 4th generation owners took over, we did not have a Milwaukee office. We didn't self-perform steel. We didn't self-perform masonry. We did not have a Madison office. I could go on and on. All
That's
these
cool.
things
Awesome.
that were leadership opportunities that allowed for them to have growth for their people. And then you also need to compensate, and you need to be thoughtful about your compensation plan. And you need to have your people feel like they have a stake in the business.
Mm-hmm.
We're very fortunate to have a robust bonus program, a robust profit sharing program. And I do feel like our people understand that the Cullens want to reward and pay for awesome performance. And thankfully, we're really able to do that.
That's great. That's great. Well, George, I've really enjoyed this interview. I'd love to get your sister on the pod and do a
Definitely.
3-way discussion at some point. I think that would be actually tremendously interesting.
We really enjoy that.
Yeah. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Construction Genius.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate being on.
Thank you for listening to Construction Genius today. I hope you enjoyed my interview with George Cullen. Once again, if you're going through a business transition and you'd like an outside voice to help you with the structure of that transition, particularly on the leadership development side of the equation, feel free to reach out to me on my website, constructiongenius.com/contact. Fill in your information there and I'll reach out to you and we can chat about if or how I might be able to be of some assistance to your company. One final request. Feel free to share this interview with other people that you may think will benefit from listening to it. And I also would appreciate if you could give us a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts so that Construction Genius can blow up all throughout the interwebs and benefit as many construction professionals as possible. As always, thanks again for listening.